Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We're back again with more King Arthur, Knight's Tale, and this time I want to go through Sir Lancelot, by far one of the most popular characters in Arthurian legend, and someone who is very, very powerful in the game. Let's go ahead and get started. So the interesting thing about Sir Lancelot's abilities is that it's almost like a cross between Champion, which is his actual class, and Sage, which has ice-related magical abilities. So it gives him a very, very interesting mix. Getting started from the left, we have Strike. You're familiar with this by now. Deals 100% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy. You can upgrade this where it'll reduce the cooldowns for all of the attacks that you do. It'll cause 20% vulnerability, and it will do a 15% damage per each strike. You also have the ability to cause bleeding on a particular target, and he does have extra bleeding, which is going to do an additional 50% weapon damage for bleeding effects. You get several abilities where you are able to cause bleeding, so you can kind of make your own decision whether or not it's worth it. Me personally, it's not worth it. So this is just the way he comes naturally spec'd. When I respec him, I'm going to take bleeding off just because I feel like the other abilities are worth it more to me, but you can make your own determination about how you would like to play him. Next up is Assault. This is going to have him charge at an enemy and attack them for 150% weapon damage. Monster ability. Absolutely incredible monster ability. So first and foremost, this has a range of, I think it starts at 2 to 4 squares, but then you can increase the range by 1 tile. Okay, so it's going to be maybe 3 to 5 squares, and then you can increase it so where it's 3 to 6. But the really important thing is that champions already do just incredible damage just with their basic attack, and then it's going to increase it by another 50%, allowing them to not just run at an enemy, but do incredible damage as well. So when you use this against archers or sorcerers or even low-level melee creatures, for that AP cost, you're going to just flat out kill them. Just flat out obliterate them. So definitely want to make sure you pick this up. Onslaught is going to give an additional 15% weapon damage. And you could also call Shock against them, which is going to reduce their AP, I believe, by 25% for their next turn. So I definitely feel like Onslaught is worth it. I would say Shocking Assault isn't, because most of the enemies you use this against are probably going to die. But your mileage may vary. Next up is Cleave. It's going to deal 75% weapon damage to every unit in a 3-tile wide area. The upgrades allow you to increase the weapon damage, cause knockback against your enemy, do an additional 20% weapon damage to the enemy in the center, and it can cause bleeding. So this is yet another one of those bleeding attack powers. If you decide you really like it, you could go ahead and pick up extra bleeding to make it even more powerful. I like Cleave quite a bit. I have Cleave on my Sir Mordred. But with Sir Lancelot in particular, he has some other abilities that I kind of favor more. And so that's why I don't particularly pick this up. But if you decide to pick it up, it's certainly not a bad choice. Next up is Lone Wolf. The hero deals 15% weapon damage while they are not adjacent with any ally. So Sir Lancelot is known for going to really dangerous places by himself and defending people. So Lone Wolf just fits in right with his personality. As far as upgrades, you can get it where weapon damage bonus is increased by an additional 5%. If the hero is not adjacent with any ally at the start of the turn, they gain +1 AP. You gain +1 unbreakable armor if you're not adjacent. +3 HP per hit when you're not adjacent. All of these are fantastic. So basically, the way I use Sir Lancelot is, well, at the beginning of the turn, Sir Mordred is who I'm going to have rushing out to as many enemies as possible, drawing all the aggro he possibly can. Sir Lancelot kind of skirts around the battlefield, picking off those enemies that are by themselves or that are easy to reach. So him being by himself is not a big deal because you should not be placing him in areas where 4 or 5 enemies are all going to gang up on him at the same time. And so Lone Wolf, I feel like, really fits in well with the way you're probably going to use champion anyway. And I definitely feel like you should be picking up all of this. Juggernaut gives you a +5 cumulative weapon damage for each tile of movement until the end of your turn. So obviously, I feel like you should be using Assault as much as possible, which is going to allow you to just rush enemies. But it does have a 2-turn cooldown, so there will be other times where you have to move around in order to reach enemies. In that particular case, Juggernaut is a monster skill, especially if you have to go a long distance before you can actually attack an enemy. So definitely something worth picking up. Extra bleeding, we've already talked about. If you're using all of these bleeding talents, then you'll definitely want to get it. If you're not going to use them for bleeding, then this isn't worth it. Me personally, I don't use it. And then finally, strength is going to give you 10% more weapon damage. Obviously, this is something you want to go ahead and pick up. Moving on to the second tile, Power Attack. It's going to deal 150% weapon damage to an adjacent enemy with an additional 15% armor breaking. For its upgrade, you can have the AP cost reduced. You can have the target take more vulnerability. You can increase the weapon damage by 25% if the targeted unit has full HP and full vitality. And you can stun the target, which means they're going to have 100% less AP for the entire duration. Power Attack is absolutely fantastic to have in your arsenal. I would definitely recommend going ahead and pick this up. You are going to face enemies with armor all the time. Next up is Inspire, which is going to give Sir Lancelot and his allies +2 AP for 1 turn. As far as upgrades, you can have it reduce the hero and allies cooldown by 1 turn, but this will increase the cooldown for Inspire. You can also make it where it will grant 1 movement AP for the target of this particular spell. You can reduce the cooldown of Inspire by 1 turn, and you can set it where it's going to remove chill, freeze, slow, and stun from affected units. So obviously, this is a great skill. Whether or not you're actually going to level this up, to me, depends upon whether or not you have Lady Guinevere. Lady Guinevere already gets this ability, and she's a mainstay in my party. So me personally, I would not level this up for Sir Lancelot. If you do not have Lady Guinevere or another sage who would be able to use this ability, then I would say it's probably worth it to go ahead and put it on Sir Lancelot, because being able to give 2 AP to your entire team is nothing to sneeze at, but I don't think you need it on 2 separate people. So, based upon the makeup of your team, you can make a decision about whether or not this is worth it. Armorer, the hero loses 1 less AP from heavy armor sigils. I would definitely recommend you pick this up. I would also definitely recommend you pick up Thick Skinned, both versions, which are each going to increase his armor by an additional +2. The other upgrades are going to increase the HP he gets from armor sigils by 10% if you take both of them, but that takes 2 skill points. If you decided you really want to do that, he does have access to Robust, which will increase your HP and vitality by 10% for those same 2 skill points. So depending upon how you use him, this might be worth it. Again, for me, he's kind of out of the way, picking his targets carefully. I probably would skip this, but if you have him more up front, like a little ways off from Sir Mordred to be a little bit closer to the action, might be worth it to make him a little more tanky. Next up is Ice Spikes. Deals 75% weapon damage in a 2-tile long 90-degree cone, 3 tiles in the front row, 5 tiles in the back row. This is an absolutely fantastic ability, since a lot of enemies are going to just be running right in front of him to be able to attack. It allows you to deal damage to multiple people in front of you, even if you don't have access to a power like Cleave. As far as upgrades, you can increase the weapon damage, you can reduce the AP cost, you can have it cause chill on targets, which is going to reduce their AP by 33%, and it can also cause knockback. I would say these first two upgrades are definitely worth it. The other two, not really for me. Knockback, I don't like knocking back enemies away from my frontline fighters. I want them to be engaged to ensure those enemies don't move on to my archers, arcanist, or my sage. And as far as chill, most of the times when I use this is because I'm about to kill all the enemies that are in front of me, either directly by Sir Lancelot or some other party member who I'm going to take control of next. So I'm not worried about how much AP they do the next turn. I don't think this upgrade is really worth it. The other thing on this second tile is Strong Will, which is going to give you an increase of 20% to your mental debuff resist. Again, same advice I had regarding Sir Mordred. 20% by itself is nothing. So if you have something else, either through your weapons, your armor, something that gives him an additional buff, where with this 20% you can get it up to like 40 or 50%, then that makes sense. But if you're just going to get this and it's going to be sitting at 20%, that's not worth it at all. Real quick, before we move on to the last panel, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate you hitting the like button. It helps me figure out what content the channel is enjoying and helps spread my videos to more people. I really appreciate all of your support. All right, moving on to the last tile, you have Whirlwind. Deals 100% weapon damage to adjacent units. You can have it cause bleeding. You can knock back those enemies. You can reduce the AP cost of Whirlwind, so it'll cost 5 AP as opposed to 6. And you can increase the weapon damage for Whirlwind. So whether or not this is worth it to you depends upon how you use them. Me personally, most of the time, again, I'm headed off to the side, picking off 1, maybe 2 targets at a time. So Sir Lancelot is not being surrounded by a bunch of different enemies. So for me, this probably isn't really worth it. But if you like your Sir Lancelot to be a lot more in the mix, and he's going to be surrounded by enemies a lot more, then this is definitely going to be worth it, and it'll definitely do nice damage. As far as the upgrades, I definitely feel like the additional weapon damage and the reduction in AP costs is worth it. Knockback, I already mentioned, I don't like knocking back enemies away from my frontline fighters. And whether or not bleeding is worth it depends on whether or not you invested into extra bleeding. If you did, I would definitely say go ahead and pick this up, stack that damage up. Next up is damage focus. The hero gains an additional 5% weapon damage per unspent AP from the previous turn. Definitely pick this up. There's going to be a lot of times where enemies are just too far away from you in order for you to be able to do anything. So it's going to be well worth having this and translating that extra AP into damage. As far as upgrades, you can make it so that the hero gains +1 AP per 3 unspent AP left in the previous turn, that you're going to gain more weapon damage per unspent AP, and that you're going to get 3 armor per 3 unspent AP, and that the AP spent on Overwatch counts as unspent for the purpose of the damage focus skill. This is the upgrade that you should get first, because Overwatch for your frontline fighters is very common. When an enemy is too far for you to get to, then you go as far as you can while still being able to do an Overwatch skill, and then you trigger Overwatch in the hopes that that enemy is going to decide to come up to you, and then you're going to get a free hit. So sometimes, for whatever reason, enemies will not do that. And this allows you to take that IP and translate it to something that's actually going to help you. Very nice. I think you should definitely pick up this whole kit. Next up is melee expertise. While outnumbered, the hero gains 1 unbreakable armor for each adjacent enemy. You can upgrade it so that when he kills a unit, the hero automatically attacks another adjacent enemy with a free strike skill. While outnumbered, he's going to get additional 5% weapon damage for each adjacent enemy. The hero can also start their turn with 1 +1 AP for each adjacent enemy above 2. And finally, all cooldowns are reduced by 1 turn if the hero starts their turn outnumbered. So if you put your Sir Lancelot in a situation where he's going to be surrounded by a lot of people, this is definitely worth it. It's actually a monster ability that can really make him more powerful. But If you're putting him in a situation where most of the people he's facing are onesie twosies, then this isn't going to trigger enough for it to be worth it. If you are in enough situations where it's worth it, then I would say you definitely want to go ahead and get this. It could be a major game changer for your Sir Lancelot character. Next up is Radiance. Adjacent units are blinded for 1 turn. Blinded means they have an 80% chance to miss their target. So this could be very useful as a way to mitigate damage against Sir Lancelot. If he's in front of a character that he's not going to be able to kill easily, or he's in front of multiple characters, and you know he could be in a bad situation for the next round, you can go ahead and blind all of them to help ensure that they're able to do little to no damage to you. As an upgrade, you can reduce the AP cost, so it's going to cost 2 instead of 3. You can have it cost chill for all of the targets. You can make them vulnerable for 1 turn, and you can reduce the cooldown of Radiance. I would say Radiance is worth it for you, especially considering the low AP cost. So basically you can attack once or twice and then radiate all of the enemies that are around you. The only upgrade that I feel like isn't worth it is the chill version. I'm just not a big fan of chill, but all the other upgrades I feel like it's worth going ahead and picking up. Next up is extra stun. So you get an additional 20% efficiency for stun and slow effects. I don't feel like personally this is worth it. Most of the abilities that allowed you to stun, I kind of skip over, and slow effects as well. It's not something that he does well on his own. So I don't feel like this is a particularly good pickup for him. And then Executioner. The hero gains an additional 20% weapon damage against slowed or stunned units. Whether or not this is useful to you depends upon how often you're able to trigger these status effects against enemies. For me personally, my party, those status effects don't happen often, so this isn't really worth it. And then finally, you have extra area damage, so you get an additional 20% weapon damage for every skill that deals damage in an area. So that is going to be the Ice Spikes and Cleave. So if you're using those type of powers on a regular basis, then absolutely you want to go ahead and pick this up and make them more powerful. Otherwise, you could go ahead and skip this if for the most part you're using abilities that target enemies directly. And that is the setup for Sir Lancelot. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like down below, share this content, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.